Does science disprove God? Isn't the Bible full of errors? Isn't Jesus just a God of the gaps? And how is the God of the Bible any different from Zeus or Thor? Have you ever heard questions like these? How do you answer them? Have you ever talked with someone who doesn't believe in Jesus, doesn't believe in the God who's revealed himself in the Bible, and you just didn't know what to say? Well, there's a Bible verse I want to show you today. It comes from 1 Peter chapter 3. He says, "Have no fear of them, nor be troubled, but in your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you." Always being prepared to make a defense. Yeah, this word is a word that you may have heard before. In fact, there's a whole field of Christian thought that borrows its name from this word, the Greek word apologia. We hear the word apologetics. And it's not about saying I'm sorry. It's the word for defense. To be able to answer why do you believe what you believe is true. To give an answer for the reason for the hope that is in you. Why do you believe what you believe? If someone were to come up to you, like say I am right now, and ask you, why do you believe what you believe? Why trust in Jesus, in the Bible? What would you say? If you don't know why, how will you be able to articulate what we believe about the big things, the existential questions, why we're here, the meaning of life, whether God exists, whether there's life after death? How will we be able to articulate to those who don't believe, or believe something very different, to those who have questions and doubts? How will we communicate and articulate why this is true? So for the upcoming weeks, I'm planning on systematically speaking of the why, to try and give a crash course in apologetics. Hopefully, giving some tools for engaging those who believe differently than we do, to be able to explain why we have this hope to those who don't believe. I will also try to point you towards other resources, towards authors that are much smarter than I am, and books that can help you dive deeper into some of these topics. And this is really aimed to be an aid for fellow Christians, but if you're watching this and you don't consider yourself Christian, you don't believe in Jesus, there are still important questions that you should ask yourself. These questions, like why do you believe what you believe, is an important question we all should ask. For you still believe something about the world around you, about life and death, about yourself, even if you don't give it much thought. We all operate every day, whether we recognize it or not, based on beliefs and assumptions about how we see the world around us, whether they're true or whether they're false. They're assumptions that we make from the moment we get out of bed. Do we not expect our feet to get out of bed and hit the floor? We don't wake up wondering if our feet are going to be pulled toward the ceiling. We just assume that gravity exists and we operate accordingly. Every step we take, we assume gravity exists without even thinking about it. Well, similarly, we have assumptions. Some spoken ones, some conscious assumptions, but some that are subconscious, some that are unspoken, that you might not even recognize. Assumptions about the big things, about life and existence, about whether God really exists. Assumptions that inform our decisions every single day. And together, these conscious beliefs and these subconscious assumptions, they make up what some people would call a worldview. How we see the world around us. How we see ourselves. How we see God. How we interact with the world around us. So do you think about it? Do you think about your worldview? What informs the way you see things? What you truly believe about the big, important things in life. And why? Why do you believe what you believe? Why do you see the world a certain way? The why is an important question, almost as important as the question, what do you believe? Because if you don't know why you believe it, why it is true, and a foundation that's strong enough for you to build your life upon it, then why believe it? It's not just something that big thinkers, that philosophers should think about. It's something everyone needs to think about. Otherwise, we could run the risk of living like leaves, floating wherever the wind takes us, without purpose, without roots. And if there is purpose to our lives, if there is meaning, if we were made for something, we could easily miss it and die without ever fulfilling what we were made for. Maybe you're watching this right now and you feel unfulfilled. Maybe you feel a little empty, like something is missing from your life. And maybe it's because you've never asked these questions. Or maybe it's because your worldview doesn't hold up. So, what do you believe? And why do you believe that it's true? For myself, I grew up in the church, like maybe many of you. And when I was young, my faith was rather limited. But I did believe that God existed. And I remember going to college and being confronted by people, professors and students, who believed very differently than I did, who believed that God was a fairy tale, and who were quite certain that anyone who believed in God was foolish, that it was wish fulfillment, that it was on par with believing in the tooth fairy. And I didn't know how to answer them. I didn't know how to defend my rather limited faith. And before long, I too began to question, do I believe what I believe is really real? And why? Why believe it? Years later, I grew both deeper in my relationship with Jesus and in my knowledge of God and the world around me. And I greatly wished then, and I greatly wish now, that I could have been equipped then to give an answer. And so I've become determined to be prepared to give an answer, to defend the reason for the hope that I have now. So we're going to be talking about this for a few weeks. A few initial points I just want to start off with. This is not an exegetical Bible study. Perhaps you're like me, and you believe that the Bible is reliable and true, and that God has revealed himself and more through his word. But many we talk to do not hold to this belief. For many people, to simply appeal to the Bible alone for our reasoning seems like circular reasoning. So we will actually mostly look at evidence and reason in science, history, the world around us, and our very nature. And perhaps we'll see that the evidence really matches what the Bible says is true. Perhaps the evidence will point to the God in the Bible. Secondly, to be a Christian, you don't have to put your brain on the shelf and stop thinking. You can believe in Jesus and be a critical thinker too. Many people, especially today, think that people of faith are people of blind faith, who stick their fingers in their ears and cover their eyes and believe what they want to believe apart from evidence, apart from reason. But this is not the case. Historically, it hasn't been the case, and it doesn't need to be the case today. So we can dispel this idea right now. For I can be intellectual and a Christian. I can be science-minded and a Christian. We should be people seeking truth, wherever that truth may lead us. Even if it led us away from the Bible, we should be seeking truth. And we should be a people who absolutely use our brains, logic, reason, who consider all evidence, and know why we believe what we believe. For many of us, the why is because we've met and know the living God. Because Jesus has changed us. We have a story, a testimony. And our story and our testimony, it might be our strongest witness, but it doesn't have to stand alone. And if all we can say about Jesus is subjective, like I've experienced this, or I feel this or that, then we shouldn't be surprised when others consider our faith blind and Christians as unintellectuals. Even the gospel writers, 3 of whom knew firsthand the living Christ, they emphasize the evidence and the proofs over their feelings. So be a critical thinker. I want to point you to a couple resources, even today, that you can check out. One is an apologist and an author whose name is Ravi Zacharias. If you've never read him or heard him speak, I really encourage you to check him out. Look him up on YouTube. There's plenty of videos. And he is a brilliant man who will remind us that we stand on solid ground. The second is a book entitled, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. It's a great title. And certainly I hope we'll see that it does take a great deal of faith to believe atheism as well. In fact, the question to ask is, which belief requires the greater leap of faith? Which belief system is more guilty of creating a God of the gaps? So that'll lead me to my last point today. And I hope as we go through this, at the very least, that you can gain a confidence. You don't need to fear that we stand on shaky ground as Christians. The world around us would have us believe that we stand on shaky ground, would have us believe that the burden of proof lies with us alone, and that we have no evidence to show for it. But this is a lie. Not only is the evidence in our favor, as I hope you'll find, but the atheist, the agnostic, people of other faiths, they also have the burden of proof to bear. But we're going to get to that in some weeks to come. I look forward to this. I'm not an expert in apologetics, but I am passionate about the pursuit of truth. And I hope you are too. We'll explore evidence. We'll look at science. We'll look at history, philosophy, psychology. We're going to use reason and logic as we seek truth. And I pray that you discover what I've discovered. That when you ask the big questions, when you seek truth, you will not only be equipped in your witness to people of other faiths and beliefs, but you'll grow deeper and fall deeper in love with Jesus. I'll see you.